My 47-year-old husband, on his deathbed, chose to confess to me. He said the daughter we raised was not my child, but his sister-in-law's. Back then, while I was unconscious after giving birth, he swapped my child with his sister-in-law's, but his sister-in-law's child developed a high fever at the age of 6, due to delayed medical treatment. The child's brain was damaged. Perhaps my expression was truly dreadful. He wept bitterly in repentance, saying he was sorry to me. And if there were a next life, he would still be willing to marry me, spending a lifetime to make it up to me. He has schemed against me for a lifetime, and yet he dares to think about the next life. Only those who are useless would look forward to a non-existent rebirth and revenge in the next life. As for me, I usually settle scores right on the spot. Moreover, how could he not have noticed all these years? In what way does the child resemble him or his sister-in-law? After Eric received the test report from the hospital, he locked himself in the study as soon as he returned and didn't come out for the entire afternoon. I knew he was feeling terrible, so I didn't disturb him. Not long after, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, and standing outside was Eric's sister-in-law, Linda, with her daughter behind her. The girl who had become intellectually disabled after a high fever at the age of 6. Linda furrowed her brow. And the first thing she said upon seeing me was, "Has Susan come back?" Susan is my daughter, 22 years old and still in college. I shook my head. She hasn't. Then, curious, I asked, "What's wrong?" Linda ignored me, pushing past me into the living room as if she were right at home. I pulled Sarah, who was standing at the door, inside as well, and when I turned around, I saw Linda sitting on the sofa, arms crossed, watching us. "Nancy, from my angle, you and Sarah actually look a bit alike." Her gaze toward me was not friendly, and the corners of her mouth held a faint, ambiguous smile. I didn't respond. This wasn't the first time she had said that Sarah resembled me. We have no blood relation at all, so how could her daughter possibly look like me? I had just sat down opposite Linda when she impatiently continued questioning. "Eric is already in this state, and you still plan to keep it from Susan?" Eric's test results had only been in hand for a little over 2 hours. And Linda already knew everything so quickly. Before I could answer, the study door opened, and Eric, who had shut himself in his room since returning, finally came out. His gaze fell on Linda, his lips trembling slightly, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to call out the word sister-in-law. Today's follow-up report confirmed Eric's illness, advanced stage lung cancer. With symptoms of metastasis and spread already present, he has missed the optimal window for treatment. And his life is now down to its final few months. The two locked eyes for a moment before Linda spoke first. "Eric, I still think we shouldn't keep this from Susan. She is your daughter, don't you agree?" She emphasized the words, "your daughter." Eric remained silent for a long while before finally saying, "We shouldn't keep it from her." The two of them went back and forth, occasionally exchanging glances. Completely ignoring me as if I were invisible, I pretended not to notice. I didn't care about such things when I was young, and now, with someone who is nearing the end of his life, what is there to be angry about? Eric had almost no close relatives left. His parents and older brother had long since passed away. Apart from me and our daughter, there were only his sister-in-law, Linda, and her daughter, Sarah. Seeing that Eric was about to call Susan, I stepped forward to stop him. "Susan will be on summer break in just half a month. It won't make much difference to wait a few more days." Eric pondered for a moment, then nodded and put away his phone. Linda's expression darkened as she glanced at me. "As a mother, you're quite controlling, aren't you?" I smiled. "What parent doesn't think about their child's well-being?" "That's true," she said pointedly. "It's a shame about my own fool. Even if I wanted to plan for her, it wouldn't do much good." Sarah, sitting next to me, was playing with her fingers with her head down. Carefree, in stark contrast to her mother's calculating eyes. "That sounds nice, but what has she ever planned for?" Sarah, a woman in her 20s with a buzz cut, wearing ill-fitting clothes, her face and body tan dark, looking nothing like a girl at all. Eric walked over and sat on the same side of the sofa as Linda, with a person's distance between them. Since everyone was here, I asked Eric, "How do you want to proceed with the treatment?" Eric pinched the bridge of his nose. Looking utterly dejected. "Haven't figured it out yet." His complexion was terrible. Ever since the diagnosis, it was as if all his vitality had been drained from him. Linda kept her head down, playing with her phone, as if she hadn't heard what we were saying. Perhaps to prevent patients from losing the will to live, doctors' words are always ambiguous. He would not directly tell the patient that the disease is incurable, nor would he say that it can be cured. Instead, he would give the patient the illusion that as long as they receive proper treatment, there is still a possibility of recovery. Eric has already been misled by this illusion. Over the years, he has accumulated some savings from his business, so the cost of treatment in the later stages would not be a major issue if he decided to proceed. At this point in the conversation, Linda suddenly chimed in. I think conservative treatment is still the way to go. That way, you won't have to suffer too much. Eric's face looked even more ashen. Conservative treatment, in his eyes, must have been equivalent to giving up on treatment. He usually listened to Linda, but when it came to matters concerning his own life, it was different. No matter how much one usually claims not to fear death, when truly facing the brink of death, there is always an unknown fear deep within. When that unknown fear is amplified, a person develops a strong desire to survive. Linda said she would stay at my house on the grounds that she was afraid I couldn't take care of Eric alone, and as his sister-in-law, she wanted to stay and help me. Eric didn't speak, turning to look at me as if seeking my opinion. I really did have work to attend to, and I had originally planned to hire a caregiver to look after Eric. With Linda offering herself, I had no reason to refuse. Then I'll trouble you, sister-in-law. Linda pursed her lips. We're all family, no need to be so polite. Linda was indeed not one to stand on ceremony. That evening, she lay on the sofa, wearing a face mask while binge-watching a drama, and still found time to direct me to give her daughter a bath. She said, I've completely forgotten how long it's been since the little fool had a bath. Nancy, why don't you just give her a quick wash while you're at it? Sarah was watching TV, where a chase scene between a cat and a mouse could make her giggle for half the day. I still remember how smart and adorable this child was before she turned 6. To see her like this now, one can only say that having such a mother is her fate. Sarah and Susan were born on the same day, with Susan being 3 hours older than Sarah. Sarah hadn't finished watching the cartoon and struggled. Unwilling to come with me, Linda glared at her with disgust and shouted, Go take a bath. I clearly felt Sarah's body tremble violently. She crouched down, covered her head, and let out a loud scream. This is a common stress response after being frequently beaten. The noise in the living room was too loud, and Eric also came out of his room. He glanced at Sarah, who was crouching on the ground, holding her head and still screaming, then looked at Linda, somewhat impatiently. Why are you yelling at her? Linda snorted coldly. I really regret not strangling her when she was born. While saying these things, she also glanced at me several times. I have been watching from the sidelines all along. Linda only has Sarah as her child in this lifetime, and how she chooses to treat her child is her own business. No one else has the right to interfere. After Eric's friends learned about his illness, they came to visit one after another. With so many people, it was inconvenient to eat at home, so I arranged a nearby hotel. All of them were longtime friends who had collaborated with Eric for years. They were considerate of his condition and only brought up topics that would make him happy, along with some fun memories from the past. During this time, I noticed that someone named Bruce seemed to know Linda. Their eyes met several times, and their expressions seemed to convey something between them. Bruce didn't leave a deep impression on me. He only started interacting with Eric a few years ago, and their friendship didn't seem particularly close. Even Eric was surprised that he showed up today. I observed them discreetly. During the meal, Linda went out for a while, and Bruce also excused himself to go to the restroom, quickly following her out. They weren't the only ones who left the table. Other friends also stepped out during the meal, so their departure didn't raise any suspicion. It took the two of them nearly 20 minutes to return, one after the other. After this return, Bruce's mood had clearly improved a lot, and he became much more talkative. During the conversation, whether intentionally or not, he even brought up the topic of assets. The atmosphere at the dinner table grew heavy because of this topic. The smile on Eric's face completely vanished, and his hand holding the chopsticks trembled uncontrollably. A friend sitting next to Bruce playfully punched him, trying to lighten the mood. Why bring that up? Our Eric is blessed with great fortune and a long life. As soon as these words were spoken, a chorus of agreement followed. Just as the atmosphere seemed to be taking a positive turn, Linda suddenly said, He's not wrong, Eric. Even if you don't think about others, shouldn't you at least consider your child? When she said, others, her gaze swept over me, filled with malice. Eric and I both put down our chopsticks at the same time. There was no way we could continue this meal. I had 2 glasses of wine at the dinner table and went to bed early that night. I don't know how long I slept, but I was awakened by faint sounds of an argument. Linda and Eric were having a dispute, whether in the living room or the study, I couldn't tell. I cracked the door of my room open a little and heard Susan's name mentioned, along with something about a will. What? Does Linda also want Eric to include her in his will and leave her a share of his assets? over the years, Eric and I have each had our own careers. In addition to his job, Eric has also partnered with some friends to run a few businesses. I don't know whether they've been profitable or not, as we've never discussed our incomes with each other. The household expenses and Susan's costs have always been shared between us. I know that Eric has been secretly supporting Linda. With a child whose mental development is stuck at the level of a 5 or 6-year-old, it's true that she can't work. All these years, I've simply pretended not to know anything about it. The next day, Eric said he had made up his mind and was ready to follow the treatment plan given by the doctor. This was within my expectations, and I said, okay. After a moment of silence, Eric added, Nancy, I want to make a will. I walked over and held his hand. Eric, don't overthink it. Let's listen to the doctor and focus on getting better. We're not at that point yet. Eric's eyes were unusually red. He still insisted on making a will. He said, we only have Susan as our child. He wanted to leave all the property to Susan and asked if I had any objections. Linda interjected with a sarcastic tone from the side. Susan is her daughter. What opinion could she possibly have? As she said this, her eyes were evasive, not daring to meet my gaze. I smiled and said, yes. Susan is my daughter, so of course I have no objections. As soon as these words were spoken, Eric and Linda visibly breathed a sigh of relief. During this period of actively receiving treatment, Eric was also consulting with a lawyer to draft a will. In just half a month, he had lost most of his hair, and his complexion was visibly deteriorating. I hired a caregiver to help Linda take care of Eric. Linda claimed she was helping me look after Eric. But she was used to her freedom. How could she possibly stay in the hospital? Moreover, it seemed she had taken up with another lover in the past 2 years, and the two were inseparable, completely infatuated with each other. Not only did she fail to come to the hospital to take care of Eric, but she also left Sarah for Eric and the caregiver to look after. Naturally, the caregiver was unhappy, and after complaining to me, I increased his salary. After all, the money for hiring the caregiver was paid by Eric. When I didn't see Linda at the hospital for the 3rd time, I asked Eric, has my sister-in-law not been coming to the hospital these past few days? Eric had lost a significant amount of weight, his complexion was sallow, and his hair had thinned out, making him look like an old man, with none of the spirited demeanor he had before his illness. He shook his head, as if unwilling to talk too much about Linda. Over the years, Linda had found one lover after another outside, and Eric was not unaware of it, but he simply had no grounds to stop her. Now, he had neither the heart nor the strength to do so. I sat by the hospital bed and brought him 2 pieces of good news. The doctor said you can be discharged tomorrow, and Susan will also be back tomorrow. Upon hearing this, Eric's expression finally relaxed. He had long wanted to leave the hospital and had been waiting for Susan to return. On the day Susan returned, Linda, who hadn't been back for over a week, also came home, having just learned that her father was seriously ill. Susan cried for a long time in Eric's arms. Eric's eyes also reddened, but he continued to comfort her. Linda stood to the side, unusually at a loss for what to do. Like Eric, she had been comforting Susan the whole time, looking at her as if she were her own daughter. Susan wiped away her tears, then turned and took Linda's hand. She said, Auntie, I heard you've been taking care of my dad all this time. Thank you for your hard work. Linda beamed with joy, her smile blooming like a flower. Oh, you silly child, we're all family here. There's no need to talk about hard work. The 3 of them stood together, looking more like a family of 3, which made me and Sarah seem like outsiders. During the 2 months of Susan's summer vacation at home, Linda also rarely went out. She would take care of Eric together with Susan. I often saw the 3 of them laughing and chatting together, and Eric's gaze would frequently fall on the 2 of them, his eyes filled with contentment. Time passed quickly. After Susan started school, Linda also left my home, only visiting occasionally. Eric's condition worsened day by day. His hair had fallen out completely by the 2nd month of chemotherapy. Susan bought him all sorts of wigs and hats. Eric mostly just looked at them and rarely wore them, as he hardly went out anymore. The severe weight loss and the pain from his illness made him increasingly reluctant to move. I always felt that Eric had been looking at me more and more strangely lately, as if he had done something wrong to me. What could he possibly have done to wrong me? He had already made a will, leaving all his property to my daughter, Susan. One day 3 months later, Eric, who had been unable to even drink water, suddenly said he was hungry, and his spirits suddenly improved. The caregiver hurriedly called me, asking me to come and see. Both she and I knew that Eric was experiencing a final rally. I had been away on a business trip for over half a month. using it as an excuse not to visit him until now. When I saw Eric, I was still taken aback for a moment. In just half a month, he had become so thin that he was practically skin and bones. I sat down in the caregiver's chair beside Eric's bed and asked him how he was feeling. Eric held my hand. His face so gaunt it seemed like only a thin layer of skin remained, and managed a faint smile. "I'm feeling much better. It's as if the strength I lost before has finally returned, the final rally. It's probably like this, all the organs in the body seem to have agreed to exert their last bit of strength together." How could Eric not know the condition of his own body? He looked at me for a long time, and suddenly tears fell. I heard him say, "Nancy, I'm sorry." He tightened his grip on my hand. But he didn't have much strength left anyway, so the force was just enough to hold my hand a little tighter. Eric said, "If I don't tell you these words, I won't be able to rest in peace even in death." This piqued my curiosity. "Eric, you didn't do anything to betray me, did you?" Eric avoided my gaze and, after a long pause, said, "Nancy, Susan is actually my child with Linda. Back then, while you were unconscious after giving birth, I swapped the two babies." I felt my vision darken. And it took me a long while to find my voice again. "Are you saying that Sarah is actually my daughter?" Eric lowered his head, not daring to look at me or respond. "But, how could that be? When Susan was 12 years old, she and I had a paternity test done, and the results confirmed a biological relationship. I have always known that Eric doesn't like me. Back when his brother and my ex-husband died together in a mining accident, there were rumors about him and his sister-in-law. After my husband's death, my mother-in-law drove me back to my parents' home, blaming me for being a jinx and saying I was the one who caused her son's death. This was utterly ridiculous. It was she who had arranged for him to work in the coal mine through connections, yet in the end, she pinned all the blame on me. I had only stayed at my parents' home for a few days when my sister-in-law started slamming things around, giving me dirty looks and speaking sarcastically. My mother, afraid of this sharp-tongued sister-in-law, only advised me to remarry quickly while I was still young. It was at that time that Eric's family sent a matchmaker to our door. Eric was already 25 that year, and his family was truly so poor they couldn't even put food on the table. What decent family would be willing to marry their daughter into such a household? When the matchmaker came to propose, my mother didn't hesitate much before agreeing. She had originally thought to ask for some bride price, but when she saw my belly, she couldn't bring herself to open her mouth. Before the wedding, I told Eric the truth. I had only discovered I was pregnant after my husband died. If Eric couldn't accept it, it was understandable. Eric hesitated for a long time but eventually agreed to marry me. At that time, his family had a poor reputation in the village. His father had passed away early. His mother suffered from a chronic illness and relied on medication year-round, and now even his older brother was gone. The villagers said that the location of his family's ancestral grave was bad, which was why their life was so difficult. If Eric didn't marry me, he would likely remain a bachelor for the rest of his life. Eric and I never even had a wedding banquet. He simply pinned a red flower on a borrowed bicycle, pulled me from my home to his, and that was how we got married. It was only after the wedding that I learned about Eric and his sister-in-law, Linda. At that time, I realized I had been deceived, but I had no other options. I didn't have a single cent to my name, my own family wouldn't take me in, and without Eric, I had nowhere to go. I muddled through the days one by one until I was over 2 months pregnant, and Linda also found out she was pregnant. Back then, I calculated it over and over again and finally realized that there was a high probability Linda's child was Eric's. I have never harbored any intention to harm others, so why are the people around me scheming against me one by one? A dying man speaks with kindness. Eric rambled on at length, confessing the foolish things he did in his youth. Did he truly regret doing these things? Of course not. He was merely hoping that if there really were judges in the underworld, they might lessen his sins. Eric's tears fell drop by drop on the back of my hand. He choked up, almost unable to speak. "Nancy, I'm sorry for you and Sarah. If there's a next life, I'll marry you again, okay? I'm willing to spend a lifetime making it up to you and our child." He schemed against me for a lifetime, and even in his final moments, he was still paving the way for Linda. How could someone like him be worthy? And how dare he mention a next life to me? I pulled my hand from his grasp and wiped it clean with a wet wipe, finger by finger. "So, you left all your property to Susan in your will, just because you knew she was your biological daughter." Eric has started using his old tactic of silence against me again. When we had occasional arguments in our younger years, he would do the same, saying nothing and subjecting me to emotional coldness. "You've schemed for over 20 years. Turning my daughter into a fool, leaving all the property to you and your sister-in-law's daughter. Since that's the case, why do you think I would ever forgive you, Eric?" Eric closed his eyes, his expression pained. "Nancy, please, for the sake of the fact that I'm about to die, why did you treat me this way?" I interrupted him. "Back then, I clearly asked for your opinion. I said if you couldn't accept the child, we could either not get married or have an abortion. It was you who agreed to let me give birth to her." Eric didn't answer my question, only persistently hoping to receive my forgiveness. He said he was about to die, and if I didn't forgive him, he would die with his eyes open. Those things have already been done, so why fear dying with eyes open? I asked him, "Eric, if I were the one who switched the children, would you forgive me?" Eric's murky gaze fell upon me, and he gave his answer almost without hesitation. "Yes, Nancy. I know I've wronged you in this lifetime, and no matter what you do, I will forgive you." With those words from him, I felt reassured. I forced out a cold smile. Sarah's high fever when she was 6 years old, it could have been cured, right? Because Linda always believed that Sarah was my daughter. She didn't take her to the hospital in time. She would have been more than happy for Sarah to die later. The doctor said that if Sarah underwent rehabilitation treatment, there was a high chance she could live independently in the future. At that time, both Eric and I were present, and Linda even asked for Eric's opinion. What did Eric say? Eric showed a reluctant expression but said, "If she can't recover to be a normal person, then there's no need to waste time and money. All of this is this child's fate." They believed Sarah was my child, and when the child turned out to be disabled, they said it was all fate. But what if Sarah had been their child all along? Outside the door, the sound of the caregiver talking to someone could be heard. It seemed someone had arrived, but they hesitated to come in. I looked at Eric, trying to see through his appearance and understand what was really going on in his mind. "Eric, back when you said you wanted to marry me, I actually thought a lot about it. I felt that if you were truly good to me, I would definitely make a good life with you. And that's exactly how it turned out. I was never afraid of hardship. Even though Eric's family was so poor, I still managed to support him and get through it step by step." Eric lowered his head, his face so thin it was almost nothing but bones, and no expression could be discerned. "But you schemed against me, time and again, not even sparing my child." I stabbed straight into his heart with every word. "Eric, I raised Susan for over 20 years, while Linda never raised her at all. Have you ever considered that if she doesn't acknowledge Linda and only recognizes me as her mother?" Eric looked up at me calmly. "Nancy, you'll probably scold me for saying this, but Susan is Linda's and my biological daughter. She carries our blood, and we are inherently close," he said. Linda already told Susan. They recognized each other as mother and daughter back when Susan was in her second year of high school. As soon as his words fell, the door to the hospital room was pushed open, and Linda, who had been eavesdropping outside long enough, walked into the room. "Nancy," she said with a victorious smile on her face, "since you already know everything, it's time to return my daughter Susan to me. Of course, you can take your little fool with you anytime." Seeing that I remained silent, she continued, "Raising her all these years has been no small burden. You know, a fool is much harder to care for than a normal person." She looked at me as if I were a fool, for so many years. That's how she had always seen me, but only I knew who the real fool was. Living among them, I had the illusion that the whole world was drunk while I alone remained sober, so I endured them again and again, knowing that only by letting them act arrogantly could I have the last laugh. But now, there is no longer any need to endure. I asked them, "You've always said that Susan is your biological daughter, but have you ever done a paternity test?" Eric and Linda were taken aback. Linda looked disdainful and said, "When Eric brought the child over, I was there too. What's the point of doing a test? I believe one should not leave this world with regrets, especially Eric. After all, we were once husband and wife." So, I took out the copy of the paternity test that I always carry in my bag, tossing one to Linda and the other to Eric. "What is this?" Linda casually flipped through it, but upon seeing Susan's name, she was filled with disbelief and immediately turned to the last page. "How is this possible?" The paternity test results for Susan and me indicated a biological parent-child relationship. I kindly explained to them, "When Susan was 12, I already took her to do a paternity test." "What? Haven't you done a paternity test with Sarah?" Eric was also stunned. His muddled mind couldn't process it for a long time, and he just murmured, I clearly swapped the children." He did swap the children, but later, I swapped them back. How could I not be wary of a man who was involved with his sister-in-law even before marriage? After learning that he married me just to cover up his dirty affairs with my sister-in-law, I started guarding against both of them, looking at the two people in front of me, who were so shocked they were almost dumbfounded. I continued to twist the knife in their hearts. You two are truly heartless, treating your own daughter like that. How does it feel to turn your own child into a fool? If Linda had treated Sarah well, how could a perfectly fine young girl like Sarah have become a fool? At first, when I saw how they treated Sarah, I couldn't help but feel pity, but later, when I realized they treated her that way because they thought she was my daughter, I immediately withdrew all my sympathy. To be merciful to the enemy is to be cruel to oneself. Eric's last ounce of energy finally ran out. He lay slumped on the hospital bed, his eyes wide open, with only his final breath remaining. I was somewhat puzzled. Weren't you just apologizing for what you did to me? You even said you were willing to spend your next life making it up to me. Now you don't have to apologize anymore, and you don't owe me anything. Aren't you happy? And besides, I just asked you if I were the one who switched the children. You said you would forgive me. You even said you would forgive me no matter what I did. Eric could no longer speak. His eyes had lost focus, fixed on a void. Only his lips still quivered, as if murmuring something. Linda finally snapped back to reality. She threw herself in front of Eric, gripping the front of his hospital gown with both hands. In her panic, her words came out in a jumble. Eric, the will, redo it. Lawyer Carl, yes, contact Lawyer Carl first. She fumbled around, searching for her phone to make the call, watching the pupils in Eric's eyes gradually dilate. I spoke the final words I had prepared for him. A person cannot do too many bad deeds. They will face retribution. When Bruce arrived at the hospital with Lawyer Carl, Eric had already taken his last breath. His eyes were wide open, and no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't close them. Just as he had said, if I didn't forgive him, he would never rest in peace. I suppose he didn't need my forgiveness after all. Linda gave a somewhat incoherent explanation of what had happened to Lawyer Carl, who then asked for more details and even reviewed the paternity test report I had given Linda. He pushed his glasses up on the bridge of his nose and said, "This appraisal report is genuine. If what you said is true, then the will took effect the moment the natural person made it. Now that the natural person has passed away, the will cannot be altered." Linda's voice cracked with despair. "But she's not his biological daughter. My daughter is his real child. How can the inheritance go to an outsider?" Attorney Carl still shook his head. According to Article 1133 of the Civil Code of the People's Republic of China, a natural person may, in accordance with the provisions of this law, make a will to dispose of personal property and may designate an executor of the will. A natural person may make a will to designate one or more of the statutory heirs to inherit personal property. A natural person may make a will to donate personal property to the state, a collective, or an organization or individual other than the statutory heirs. A natural person may establish a testamentary trust in accordance with the law. He continued to explain. Article 1127 states that the first order of heirs includes the spouse, children, and parents. This means that, in the absence of a will specifying otherwise, both the spouse and children are entitled to inherit the estate. However, once Eric has made a will and clearly designated Susan as the heir, the estate will be distributed according to the will's provisions, rather than following the statutory order of inheritance. Therefore, it is possible to leave the inheritance only to the children and not to the spouse by making a will. That is to say, if there had been no will back then, Linda could have completely used the paternity test report between Sarah and Eric to claim a share of the inheritance. Back then, she was in a hurry to have Eric make a will because she was afraid that half of the property would be taken by me, the spouse. Actually, I don't really care about Eric's wealth. I've been working all these years, and my salary is more than enough to support both myself and Susan. But who would turn down something that comes for free? She schemed and plotted, only to end up with nothing, while I, who schemed nothing, gained everything. Upon learning that Linda had not obtained Eric's assets, Bruce's expression turned sour as he cursed at Linda several times before storming off in anger. He was with Linda because he had his eye on Eric's inheritance. Now that there's no hope, he doesn't want to keep up the act for even a second. Linda still refused to believe it. She had been arrogant and domineering in front of me for most of her life, and she couldn't accept that all the good fortune had suddenly fallen into my lap after Eric's death. In truth, what she found hardest to accept was that Sarah was truly her daughter. After all, no one knew better than her how she had treated Sarah over the past 20 years. She insisted on finding Susan, convinced that my paternity test was fake, and demanded to have a DNA test done with Susan. Susan had no objections to this. Her attitude toward Linda remained gentle. "Auntie, you can arrange it. I'm free anytime these days. Linda almost couldn't wait to drag Susan to the hospital. With an expedited paternity test, the results would be available within 24 hours. Linda was the type who wouldn't give up until she hit a wall. After receiving the paternity test report, she finally gave up completely. She had schemed and plotted for half a lifetime, only to end up paving the way for us, the mother and daughter. She was so furious that she was directly admitted to the hospital. I heard she still had debts to pay outside. Originally, she had planned to coax Susan into using part of the inheritance to settle them once it was in hand, but now everything had fallen through. It's not that Susan has a strong ability to accept things. I told her the whole truth when she was 12 years old. I raised her with my own hands, and the resilience I instilled in her countless times finally came in handy this time. I have to admit that Eric has always been very good to Susan, though it's highly likely that this kindness stems from his belief that she is his biological daughter. So, at first, Susan found it somewhat difficult to accept, and she remained in low spirits for a long time, but after understanding Eric and Linda's schemes against me, Susan still chose to side with me. She said, "Mom, you haven't done anything wrong. They shouldn't treat you like this." In the year Susan was in her first year of high school, Linda secretly started contacting her. Just as I suspected, Linda believed that Susan was her biological daughter, and now that Susan was old enough, she wanted to reclaim her. Every time Linda contacted Susan, she would tell me. Sometimes Susan couldn't understand it either, and she would ask me, "Mom, why didn't Dad marry Auntie back then?" I had thought about this before. After his brother died, he could have married his sister-in-law, although such things were rare. They were not unheard of. It was only later that I figured it out. Because he couldn't bear the gossip from the villagers, and also, he wasn't as satisfied with Linda as he had imagined. Eric is actually a coward at heart, which is evident from his family's destitute situation. A grown man should be able to carve out a path for himself no matter where he goes, yet he is content with the status quo. In fact, there is another reason why Eric didn't marry Linda. Back then, Eric's mother also disliked Linda. Her eldest son was doing perfectly fine as a carpenter. But because Linda complained about his low earnings and constantly argued with him, she ended up pushing him into mining. Eric's mother said the exact same thing as my ex-mother-in-law. She claimed that Linda brings misfortune to her husband. Many women lost their husbands in that mining disaster, and many of the widows were burdened with the label of being husband killers. These burdens were imposed by one woman upon another. The overwhelming, pent-up emotions had to find an outlet. Right and wrong, black and white, there is nothing left to say. Eric's mother didn't like me either, especially after learning I was pregnant. She looked down on me and bluntly said I had to abort the child before I could enter her family's door. Later, I don't know what Eric said to her, but she never brought up the abortion again. She only told me to have this child quickly and then hurry up and have another one that was Eric's biological child. Unfortunately, my child was born just as the one-child policy was implemented, and each family was only allowed to have one child. At that time, Eric said he would treat my child as his own. Back then, I was genuinely moved for a moment, and I truly felt fortunate that, no matter when, I never let love cloud my judgment. On the day I gave birth, Linda fell in the courtyard, and the child in her womb, though not yet full term but long claimed to be, was finally about to be born. Linda and I gave birth in the same hospital. At the time, I became wary. Linda's fall seemed quite suspicious, and I felt as though she had deliberately waited to give birth on the same day as me. I have always trusted my intuition, so I remained vigilant at all times. After giving birth, even though I was so exhausted that I could barely keep my eyes open, I bit the tip of my tongue to stay awake. I carefully examined the baby, and only after spotting a red birthmark behind her earlobe did I allow myself to fall into a deep sleep. As I had expected, when I woke up, Eric cheerfully placed the baby in my arms. Newborns all have wrinkled little faces and look quite similar. While Eric wasn't paying attention, I took a look at the baby's ear. There was no birthmark behind the baby's ear. At that moment, I began to doubt myself. Was the memory of the birthmark behind the baby's earlobe just a dream I had? Fortunately, I am not someone who dwells on internal conflicts. Since doubts had arisen, I decided to verify them. Enduring the pain, I asked Eric to hold the child and said I wanted to see my sister-in-law. Eric was somewhat reluctant, but he ultimately had to care for two postpartum women at the same time. His sister-in-law's side also couldn't do without him. In those days, giving birth usually meant staying in the hospital for just one day before going home. If my child had truly been swapped, I needed to get them back before leaving the hospital. In those days, surveillance cameras were a rare sight, after confirming that Linda's child indeed had a red birthmark behind the ear, I began planning how to swap the children back. There was only one opportunity to swap the children back. And that was when we were heading home together. While Eric was helping Linda out the door and into the car, I used the fastest speed I could muster in my life to switch the two babies' blankets. Linda still refused to give up. She sued me, determined to reclaim the property Eric had left behind. I had Eric's will in my hands. How could she possibly succeed in her lawsuit? Moreover, Eric and Sarah have never undergone a paternity test. Later, she started playing the victim card, repeatedly coming to my house to cry and complain, saying that raising Sarah was difficult for her and that she needed money to treat Sarah's illness. But Sarah's illness had already been delayed by her. One day, Susan read a book and joked with a smile, "Mom, you told Dad everything before he died. Aren't you afraid he might be reborn and come back to take revenge on you? How could there possibly be rebirth in this world, even if such a good thing existed? It shouldn't fall upon those foolish people. Even if he is reborn, with the memories of an extra lifetime, I might still be a match for him. A mind as deep as the sea will eventually drown in its own depths. Better to be honest with each other and walk together into the sunlight." After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. In my previous life, just before the wedding, I discovered my fiancé Bob and my best friend lying naked together on the marital bed. In a fit of rage, I threw a vase at the adulterous couple on the bed. Bob, who had been struck on the head, immediately called the police. Facing charges of intentional assault, I was given the choice of either being detained or settling the matter by compensating him with 500,000 yuan. My mother immediately chose to settle for compensation for my sake. Given that things have escalated to this point, the two of them can only call off the engagement. However, when returning the betrothal gifts, Bob claimed that the 660,000 yuan worth of gold jewelry I returned was all fake. According to the current skyrocketing gold prices, I need to refund him 1.28 million yuan in cash. This wiped out my mother's lifelong savings and all of my own deposits. My frantic mother suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and was admitted to the ICU, under the immense shock. I was in a daze, stumbled and fell down the stairs, hitting my head and dying. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the day I caught them in the act. I watched with several relatives as my fiancé Bob and my best friend Luna lay naked together on the wedding bed, clothes scattered all over the floor, the room filled with a nauseating smell. For a moment, the world fell silent. The relatives were all shocked by the shameless sight of the two before them. As for me, I was in a daze. Having just returned from being reborn, in my previous life, just before I fell down the stairs and was on the brink of death, I received a court enforcement notice demanding that I compensate Bob with 1.28 million in cash. Before closing my eyes, I knew that even if I died, this money would still have to be paid to that villain, Bob. Shameless scoundrels, what are you doing, Mr. Bob? You and Kathy are about to get married. How could you do something like this? Oh. Isn't this woman Kathy's good friend? How come you're with your good friend's fiancé? How shameless. The relatives snapped out of their shock and began cursing at the adulterous couple. Bob and Luna didn't react like others caught in the act, panicked or hurried. Instead, they both looked at me with eyes full of provocation and disdain. Seeing me remain silent, Bob leisurely picked up the blanket and thoughtfully covered Luna with it. How did you get here? I thought you were going to pick out a wedding dress. It wasn't a scene of kneeling and begging for mercy, or crying bitterly. He was acting shamelessly to the extreme. I suddenly remembered that before coming to see the wedding house, I had sent a message to Bob, saying I would bring relatives along to see it. He knew we were coming and was waiting here specifically. In my previous life, I was completely out of my mind and didn't even think about these things. Seeing the shameless expressions on their faces, I grabbed a large vase and threw it at both of them. Bob's head was bleeding, but he just wiped it off and calmly called the police. He wanted to provoke me. I understand. I couldn't let him provoke me again, but my relatives were the first to get angry. Good thing we came to check out Kathy's wedding home. Otherwise, how would we have caught you fooling around with another woman here? Hurry up and take a picture. Let everyone see how disgusting these two are. The relatives had already taken out their phones, aiming them at the two disheveled individuals. Don't take pictures, I shouted, and stood in front, blocking the relatives' camera. The relatives looked at me in surprise. Are you crazy, Kathy? What if they don't admit it if we don't record it? I let out a bitter laugh. What does it matter whether you admit it or not? At the time in court, I submitted the video of Bob and Luna's affair. But the law stated that Bob and I hadn't registered our marriage yet, so what he did wasn't illegal, it was just a moral issue. Instead, Bob threatened to sue me for violating his privacy. Spreading someone else's privacy is illegal, he'll sue us. With one sentence, I successfully got my relatives to turn their cameras away, so we just let it go. What if they deny it and turn the tables on us? My aunt said angrily. Of course we need to take pictures, but I can do it myself. I snapped a series of photos of the two of them, dressed lightly and snuggled together. There was not a trace of fear in their eyes, and Luna even spoke to me with a sarcastic tone. Kathy, you really can't blame me, it's your own fault for not being able to keep Bob's heart. Didn't they say that the one who isn't loved is the third wheel? The words of a scumbag woman really can make someone furious enough to spit blood. Besides, she is my best friend. And she even helped me get together with Bob. I was especially grateful to her and thought I had found my Prince Charming. Who would have thought that the two of them would end up in my wedding bed? Unfortunately, nothing she says now can provoke me anymore. In my previous life, I was emotionally unstable and fell apart, not knowing what I had done wrong for my fiancé and best friend to end up together. Now, I won't doubt myself or drain my energy over it. Because I already knew everything was illogical and abnormal. Bob and Luna were not the important people I thought they were, but wolves in sheep's clothing, shameless, and you call it true love? I'll tear your face apart. My aunt, who had always doted on me since childhood, couldn't take it anymore and lunged forward to hit Luna. I held on to her tightly. My aunt's face turned livid with anger. Kathy, don't stop me. I'd rather risk my old life to beat that despicable couple to death. I'll get justice for you. I knew how furious my aunt was. Just as in my previous life, I had wished I could have hacked them both with a knife. But how high was the price I paid for a moment of pleasure? It was the cost of a shattered family, and I don't know what will happen to my mother in the ICU after I die. It's not worth it. I held my aunt tightly and said calmly, it's not worth sacrificing ourselves for that despicable couple, looking at my extremely rational gaze. My aunt also regained some of her composure. Trash, Kathy, break off the engagement with him. Our Kathy will definitely not marry a rotten man like you. The relatives all chimed in one after another. They had taken my advice and no longer thought about hitting anyone. But since cursing isn't illegal, they still gave them a thorough scolding. But Bob and Luna showed no trace of guilt, slowly putting on their clothes while looking at my furious relatives with mockery in their eyes. Call off the engagement. All right, Kathy, first return all the betrothal gifts I gave you. Hearing him mention the betrothal gifts, my heart sank heavily. Yes, the betrothal gifts. Bob and Luna did all this, waiting for me to catch them in the act, just to force me to break off the engagement and return the betrothal gifts. This time, I can't let him lead me by the nose. I took a deep breath and sent a few photos to a group chat. I've made your affair public. You can take a good look at your photos. After saying that, I called my relatives and left. And, don't be angry, discovering this before the wedding is actually a good thing. I comforted my relatives, then called my mom. Mom, I'm coming home right now. If Bob or Bob's mother calls or messages you, don't answer or reply. When I got home, I saw my mother with red eyes. The post I shared on my social media was a photo of catching someone cheating, and I also sent it to many friends. The post went viral instantly. Bob's mother immediately called my mom. Mom didn't answer the call as I had told her, but it was impossible to miss the dozens of insulting messages. I took my mom's phone away. I sat in front of her and patiently explained the situation. I need to calm my mother's emotions. I must ensure that my mother doesn't get so angry that she has a cerebral hemorrhage again. Bob's mother's phone kept ringing non-stop. Who told you to post my son's photos all over the world? You little bitch, are you out of your mind? Bob's mother, who had always been caring and attentive to me, revealed her true colors for the first time. The false mask no longer conceals anything. You're cursing the wrong person. It's your son who's despicable, and the root of his despicability lies with you. I suggest you go get your brain checked first. His mother, infuriated by me, became even more reckless with her words. Don't get too smug, we'll sue you for invasion of privacy right away. I couldn't help but laugh. Tell me, where is the privacy invasion? The photos I posted showed scattered clothes and messy bed sheets, but not a single one involved any privacy. His mother was speechless for a moment. You worthless thing, return the betrothal gifts and gold jewelry immediately, or you'll be waiting for a court summons. Unable to get any advantage from me, Bob's mother hung up the phone, even though I had already comforted my mother, upon hearing Bob's mother's foul language. My mother still trembled with anger, tears falling from her eyes. Break off the engagement. Do it quickly, we don't want to form a marriage alliance with such a family, and we won't keep their betrothal gifts either, we'll return everything to them. I held my mother's hand. Don't worry, they're just waiting for us to return those gold ornaments because they're all fake. My mother opened her mouth in surprise. Fake? We've never touched those gold ornaments since the engagement. We always intended for you to take them all back after you got married. Yes, completely untouched, but it was useless. In my previous life, no matter how I tried to explain, I couldn't prove that I hadn't touched those gold ornaments, because after the engagement, they had always been kept at my home. I fell silent for a moment, carefully sorting through my thoughts. Undoubtedly, this was a trap arranged by Bob and my close friend Luna, a trap that was set even before Luna introduced Bob to me. Luna was in financial distress, and we hadn't been in touch for several years, but she reappeared and reconnected with me emotionally. At the time, I certainly couldn't think that much, and Bob was handsome and reliable, seemingly flawless in every way. When we got engaged, I actually didn't have any specific demands for the bride price. No matter how much he gave, I would bring it all back to our new home. It was Bob who insisted on buying 660,000 yuan worth of gold jewelry, saying he wanted to give me a grand engagement gift. He claimed that gold jewelry, unlike cash, was a gift truly meant for me personally, and he even said that gold would definitely appreciate in value. Everything turned out to be a setup. Only to discover during the breakup that the gold jewelry was fake. He was the one who was wrong first, so maybe we should follow the custom and not return the bride price. Mom was dumbfounded when she heard the gold jewelry was fake, and now the price of gold has doubled. I sighed and shook my head. It's hard to break the deadlock. If I back out, I won't be able to find real gold jewelry anytime soon. If I don't return it, Bob will definitely sue me. And the court will certainly rule that I must return the betrothal gifts. In this second life, no matter how difficult it is, I must solve this seemingly unsolvable problem. After delaying for a few days, before Bob could sue me, my mother and I took all the betrothal gifts to him to call off the engagement. When he saw me pushing that large box of betrothal gifts, a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It's just that in this life, I have my aunt and other relatives following behind me, all to ensure that my mother and I are not left isolated and helpless. Like in the previous life when his mother made me so angry I felt dizzy. Bob frowned, because my relatives had already told the people around us about how I caught Bob in bed with someone else. Hurry up and return the betrothal gifts to me, Bob couldn't wait to say, even though I had already become indifferent to life and death, seeing him. The anger in my heart was still about to erupt like a volcano. After all, I once considered him the love of my life, but who knew that human hearts are as venomous as snakes, malicious and unpredictable. Everything is here, please check it carefully. He nodded. All gold jewelry has serial numbers and invoices. I need to check them carefully. He opened the box, revealing a dazzling array of gold bracelets, gold beans, and necklaces worth 660,000. The onlookers all took a deep breath. Bob first took out the invoices and certificates, then pulled a pair of rebar cutters from his pocket. I let out a cold laugh. In my previous life, he did exactly this. He took out the steel wire cutters, cut open the gold jewelry, and loudly accused me of swapping it. My mother and I were completely stunned at the time, only able to tremble and repeat over and over that the gold jewelry was untouched. Never even thinking about why he had already prepared the tools in advance. Seeing me laugh, Bob was a bit surprised, his voice hoarse and malicious. You won't be laughing for much longer. As soon as he finished speaking, he snapped the necklace in two, revealing a grayish-white core inside. Then he clicked and clipped away, revealing the grayish-white cores of all the gold jewelry. Everyone present widened their eyes in shock. Fake. It's all fake. The gold Kathy returned is all fake. Look. Everyone, I bought her 660,000 yuan worth of genuine gold, and what she gave back is all counterfeit. Bob's mother also rushed out, hurling foul-mouthed insults at me, calling me wicked and utterly rotten. I glanced at my mother. Fortunately, I had taken precautions in advance, and she just pursed her lips without saying a word. I squeezed my mother's hand. It was wonderful. Thank goodness for the rebirth. My mother wouldn't be so enraged that she fainted like in the previous life. Only to be held back by Bob, unable to be taken to the hospital for a checkup in time. Utterly shameless. We gave you real gold, and you gave us a pile of worthless junk in return. No one is leaving today. Bob was still shouting and screaming, but I acted as if I couldn't hear him, letting him jump around in a frenzy. I never intended to leave in the first place, and his act isn't over yet. I just muttered without any emotion, these things are untouched, and I don't know anything about them. Just like in the previous life, Bob called the police again. Bob's mother didn't stop either, spewing all kinds of foul language. But don't think you can tear me apart with these ugly words. But I brought my sharp-tongued aunt. Not only is she sharp-tongued, but she also listens very closely to what I tell her. When Bob's mother cursed me for being heartless and keeping their betrothal gifts, my aunt cursed her son for being dirty and messy, not knowing who he took after, anyway. It's just a case of you cursing yours, and I cursing mine. When the police arrived and advised us that this was a civil dispute that could be resolved through negotiation or a civil lawsuit. All right, Mom, Auntie, let's go. Bob looked at me with an unreadable expression, wanting to stop me, but the police wouldn't allow him to do so. Kathy, don't think that just because you deny swapping the gold, you're in the clear. I will sue you, but out of consideration for our past relationship. If you kneel down and beg me now, I might let you pay a few thousand less. His smug expression really makes me sick, but wasting any more words on such a scumbag is pointless. I spat and snapped at him. Fine, go ahead and sue. Whoever breaks their word is a dog. Bob didn't want to be a dog, so I soon received a court summons. My aunt was still quite worried about me, and she said with concern, I asked a lawyer for you, and even if you didn't exchange the gold jewelry, it's no use. They said you'd have a hard time winning this lawsuit. I looked relatively relaxed. It's okay, Auntie, I don't plan to use a lawyer for this lawsuit, to save on legal fees. Don't worry, Mom, I can handle it. The trial will begin soon. I sit alone in the defendant's seat. Bob, accompanied by a renowned lawyer, looks at me mockingly. In the public gallery are Luna and Bob's mother. Bob's demand is to return all the gold jewelry. If the original items cannot be returned, then the cash equivalent must be refunded, based on the current gold price, so I need to give him 1.28 million. He presented the numbered invoices for the gold jewelry and a video of him handing over the gold jewelry to me at the engagement ceremony. It also includes a video of me returning the gold jewelry to him. The judge carefully reviewed these and considered it a logically consistent chain of evidence. Where is your evidence, defendant? You claim you never touched these gold ornaments. Where is your proof? I remained silent for a moment. I have no evidence. It's just that, from start to finish, hasn't the plaintiff prepared everything a bit too thoroughly? But my words cannot change anything. The final judgment is that I must return the original item or the current market value of the gold jewelry, which is 1.28 million. Luna and Bob's mother cheered, and the two even high-fived each other. Meanwhile, many people in the gallery looked at me with sympathy, whispering softly, don't you think this man was indeed overly prepared? The betrothal gifts were mostly gold jewelry, and when taking them back, he even brought a rebar cutter to inspect them. It doesn't seem like something a normal person would do at all. It is a bit abnormal, but this girl has no evidence. I calmly stood up and left the table. Bob blocked my way, looking at me with a sinister smile. You didn't even cry. No problem. Transfer 1.28 million to my card within a month, otherwise, I'll apply for compulsory enforcement. You'll have to pay me back even if you have to sell everything you own. Looking at his malicious face, I finally understood what it means to have a human face but the heart of a beast. But what he didn't know was that my counterattack had only just begun. As soon as I stepped out of the courthouse, I contacted the lawyer recommended by my aunt. Once the verdict is issued, I will pay Bob 1.28 million yuan and apply to the court to secure all evidence in this case, including the fake gold certificate and invoice, and hand them over to me for safekeeping. Please help me sue the gold store on the grounds that they are suspected of selling counterfeit goods. The lawyer listened carefully to my words and slowly smiled. I understand, you want to get your fiancé involved. You want him to pay a heavy price. I am very willing to take on your case. That's right, I know I will lose this lawsuit, and I must lose it in order to win the next step. I have no evidence to prove that the gold jewelry Bob gave me was problematic, and even if I succeeded in proving it, it would only reduce the compensation a little. What I want is for Bob and Luna to pay the price, otherwise, this rebirth would have been in vain. None of the methods I thought of in my previous life worked, whether it was arguing and defending myself that I hadn't touched the gold jewelry or going to the jewelry store to ask for Bob's purchase records. Nothing was effective, and my mother, under my firm stance, has also made preparations. She gave me the money from selling the house, 1 million, plus my savings, making a total of 1.28 million. Thank you, Mom, I will definitely get this back in a while. Mom hugged me tightly. Kathy, even if you can't get it back, it's okay, as long as we, mother and daughter, are fine. I cried. After my father passed away, my mother and I relied on each other for survival, yet, in my previous life, to keep me from being detained, my mother didn't hesitate to take out her savings of 500,000 yuan and gave it to Bob to settle the matter. But Bob was ruthless and insatiable. The 500,000 yuan was just the beginning. He demanded 1.28 million. When my mother saw me breaking down over the 1.28 million, she became so anxious and angry that it triggered a cerebral hemorrhage. Not this time. The lawyer contacted me soon after. The jewelry store has already responded. They are a well-known company and will spare no expense to provide what we want in the shortest time possible. They will schedule an interview with us soon. I'll let you know as soon as I get the notification. I'm feeling much better now, okay? Opening my social media feed, I saw Luna had posted about her vacation in N City. In one of the videos, Bob's back was visible. I shared her and Bob's glorious deeds with all my friends, and their reputations were pretty much ruined, yet she never blocked me. I guess she kept me around just to show off on her social media. I gave her a like in return. Who would have thought that Luna couldn't sit still because of this like? She sent me a message, "Kathy, I haven't wronged you. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself." I didn't reply. In my previous life, I foolishly confronted her with tears and snot, asking why I treated her as a friend while she was involved with my fiancé, and why she betrayed me. It was a waste of breath, so this time I didn't pay much attention to her. As for this grasshopper, let her jump around for a few more days. When I went to the gold store to meet with their CEO and legal department personnel, the professional lawyer I hired played a crucial role. This kind of situation is truly beyond my ability to handle. This lawyer is surprisingly very young, yet he is already a rising star in the industry. Because the value has already reached millions, the gold store cannot afford to take it lightly. They provided the original drawings of these gold ornaments, the source of the materials, and the factory reports, striving to prove that every gram meets the standards and craftsmanship. What I claimed about selling counterfeit goods is nothing but nonsense, or even slander. To put it more seriously, excellent. These materials are very comprehensive, and I am quite satisfied. My lawyer spoke up. The legal department of the gold store immediately responded. In that case, your lawsuit against us for selling counterfeit goods is invalid, and we reserve the right to hold you accountable. The lawyer smiled slightly, but the serial numbers on the gold jewelry, as well as the certificates and invoices in my client's possession, are all genuine, and you have acknowledged that, haven't you? Since the serial number certificates are all unique, how were the counterfeit gold ornaments in our possession replicated? Where is the channel, and who replicated them? You can't say these have nothing to do with you. The legal representative of the gold shop opened their mouth but ultimately remained silent. If you claim this incident has nothing to do with you, I believe it won't be long before someone exploits this method, leading to more counterfeit gold ornaments appearing and more people suing you. What will your renowned brand do then? I looked at the lawyer with admiration. The lawyer smiled and spoke eloquently. I suggest you could issue an identification statement to let more people know about this, so as to prevent more from being deceived. The other party's legal personnel immediately agreed. We will do this immediately. The lawyer glanced at me. If your store believes that the materials provided can prove the authenticity of the gold jewelry, then it can only be that someone purchased the genuine item from your store, obtained the certificate and invoice, and then swapped it out. For the benefit and reputation of your store, we must find the real culprit. Our goals are aligned. What do you think? The gold shop strongly agrees. As for the request to withdraw the lawsuit, we naturally agreed without hesitation. After coming out together, the lawyer and I breathed a sigh of relief. The gold store has substantial financial resources and will quickly figure out how the gold jewelry was counterfeited, but we can't just wait idly at home. We must find the real gold jewelry. Only by finding the real gold jewelry can we completely leave Bob with no way out. I nodded repeatedly. This lawyer was definitely the right choice. Sure enough, the gold store soon uncovered evidence of the counterfeit gold jewelry. When the lawyer sent this information to my phone, I was stunned for a moment. The person in the video was not Bob. This doesn't directly prove it's Bob. What should we do? But the lawyer was very relaxed. It doesn't matter. This proves that the fake gold jewelry in your possession was counterfeited by someone else, someone you don't know and have no connection to. You can report it to the police. Bob isn't foolish enough to personally retrieve these fake gold pieces, but in the end, they did end up in his hands, and they were swapped. I hesitated for a moment, but the evidence isn't sufficient yet. There's no way to prove that Bob orchestrated all of this. The lawyer shrugged. Some evidence is found by the police after you report the case. Our individual strength is too weak. The reason is fraud, involving an amount of 1.28 million, which is sufficient to file a case. we have the 1.28 million transfer record you made to Bob, the fake gold jewelry, and the materials from the gold store. We can sue Bob for swapping the gold jewelry and orchestrating the fraud." The lawyer was full of confidence. After hearing his words, I decisively called the police. Bob was summoned, and he looked at me waiting at the police station with disbelief. It was Kathy who retaliated against me. It was clearly her who swapped my gold jewelry, and the court has already ruled that it was her counterfeit gold jewelry. It was her. The police interrupted him. That was only a judgment regarding the betrothal gift dispute between you and Kathy, which ultimately ruled that Kathy should compensate you 1.28 million yuan. It was not a judgment on her counterfeiting gold jewelry. In other words, that was merely a civil dispute, while defrauding 1.28 million yuan is a criminal matter. Seeing that Bob remained unmoved, the police officer fixed his gaze on his face for a long moment before speaking slowly. "Actually, everyone knows there's something fishy about this matter. If it really was the gold jewelry that Kathy replaced, she would have produced the real gold jewelry the moment she lost the lawsuit. There was no need for her to sell her house and give you 1.28 million in cash. This also indicates that the real gold jewelry is not in her hands, which means it can only be in yours." Bob curled his lips into a sarcastic smile. "I'd like to know when it became acceptable to handle cases based on conjecture rather than evidence. Evidence requires investigation. We will examine all your financial transactions and accounts from the time you purchased the gold jewelry up to now," the police officer said calmly. "Based on the advice of the complainant's lawyer, we will also investigate the financial accounts of your close relatives, Luna, and all related individuals." For the first time, Bob's face showed a crack. "I will sue you for slandering citizens without evidence and summoning people arbitrarily." He was showing emotional fluctuations, but I felt a bit excited, sensing that he was feeling guilty. The police officer slapped the table. "No evidence? How do you know we don't have evidence? Let me tell you, we've already found out that the person who received this batch of counterfeit gold jewelry is your cousin, your own blood relative, and we've already summoned your cousin. How do you explain this?" As soon as these words were spoken, Bob's eyes showed panic, but his mouth remained stubborn. "My cousin? What does that have to do with me?" "I don't know, I'm not sure." "Then what connection could your cousin have with Kathy?" "It seems they only met once at the engagement party and had no further contact. On the other hand, you and your cousin are quite close." Bob still wanted to argue. The police officer waved his hand. "If it's confirmed that the real gold was never in Kathy's possession, your fraud can be established." Bob's face stiffened, but his words remained defiant. "I don't have the real gold. I gave it all to Kathy when we got engaged. It's in her hands. Go investigate her." At this point, it didn't matter how loudly he protested, because the police had already decided to investigate the flow of funds in his and Luna's close relatives' accounts. The lawyer was also very happy, saying that it was only a matter of time before we achieved the desired outcome. The final piece of the puzzle is to find the real gold. Once we find the real gold, Bob's struggles will be useless. In reality, there are only two options for the gold: either sell it or hide it. I shook my head. Selling it leaves traces, but finding something someone else has hidden is too difficult. The lawyer lightly tapped the table twice with his finger. "As long as there are clues, we can ask the police to help us investigate." I let out a soft sigh of relief, feeling as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my heart. "I have a lead." I took out my phone and showed the lawyer a video. It was a woman wearing a mask and a hat who went to the pawn shop. She showed a photo on her phone to ask for a price, and that photo was of the gold beans from that batch of gold jewelry. The design of these gold beans was unique to that batch, and the shopkeeper remembered it very clearly. However, this woman did not sell them. She only inquired about the price. The lawyer's eyes lit up, looking at the timing. "It's almost certain that the real gold is in this person's hands." "Then quickly find out who this person is." The scope can be narrowed down to Bob and his family, as well as Luna and her relatives. Since it involves money, it can only be someone with shared interests, and it won't involve many people. I replied calmly. "It's Luna's mother." The lawyer was slightly taken aback, then curled the corner of his mouth. "You've had this video for a long time, haven't you? You probably also guessed who has the real gold. So why did you only bring it out now, and only tell me about it now?" I poured him a cup of tea and answered sincerely, "Because I wanted to make sure there were no mistakes. I wanted to leave Bob and Luna with no way out, no room for argument. I knew this video would be useful, but it couldn't guarantee with absolute certainty that Bob and Luna would face the consequences of their actions. I was still missing a lot of evidence that I couldn't obtain on my own. There are some things I didn't tell the lawyer." such as the fact that I have lived a second life, and that ever since I was reborn, I have been searching for the whereabouts of the real gold jewelry through various means. It was only after obtaining this video that I gained the confidence to start laying out all of this, but this video alone is not enough to definitively pin down Bob and Luna. The lawyer looked at me with a probing gaze for a moment, then extended a hand toward me. Let's get to know each other again. My name is Lucas. Hello. Kathy. I shook his hand. Lucas said softly, the next step is to let the police investigate Luna's mother. It's better to leave professional matters to the professionals. The police soon summoned Luna's mother. Bob and Luna were both anxious. They stood guard at the entrance of the police station, both wearing panicked expressions. Seeing Lucas and me arrive, Bob rushed over to block my path, his face dark and gloomy. Kathy, I underestimated you. I never thought you'd be so shameless. Actually climbing into a shyster's bed and getting him to help you mess with me. You're really something. Blood rushed to my head all at once. Lucas stepped in front of me. Mr. Bob, take a look at where you are. Is this a place for you to act tough? There are nearly a dozen cameras around here recording your words. This is public insult and slander. We'll add another charge to the lawsuit against you. Bob stiffened, opened his mouth, but didn't utter a single word. After calming my emotions, I looked at Bob. Bob, I've met two new friends. What a coincidence. Both of them were engaged to you, and both lost 1 to 200,000 yuan because of the dowry switch. I've already suggested they join me in suing you for fraud. Bob's face instantly turned deathly pale. This was what my lawyer helped me uncover. In other cities, Bob had already succeeded twice using this method, so by the time it was my turn, the amount had already reached 660,000 yuan, and soon. Good news came from Luna's mother's side. At first, when the police presented the video I provided, Luna's mother was full of excuses, claiming at one moment that she had taken the photos elsewhere, and at another that she had just gone to the pawn shop to find a bargain. However, the police then produced several videos of her selling small pieces of gold at some remote shops. The timing and the style of the gold fragments all matched up. They are all from those real gold ornaments. Luna's mother thought she was clever, believing that small shops don't require ID registration, but she didn't realize that surveillance cameras are everywhere nowadays, making it impossible to leave no trace at all. Luna's mother tearfully confessed that the remaining gold ornaments were hidden in her hometown. It was also agreed upon by Bob and Luna that Luna's mother would sell these gold ornaments for cash, and the 1.28 million I compensated would be split, with Luna receiving 380,000. At the same time, Bob's cousin confessed that the counterfeit gold jewelry was all arranged by Bob, and he was just running errands. The evidence is conclusive, forming a perfect closed loop of fraud between Bob and Luna. Even if he hires the most famous lawyer at a high price, it will be useless. That same day, Luna booked a flight to go abroad, but unfortunately, he was caught before boarding the plane, upon learning that both of them had been taken into custody. My mother and I hugged each other joyfully. That's great. Lucas found me and said that Bob wanted to see me. If you don't want to see him, I'll just turn him down directly. I smiled. See him? The chance to vent my anger has come. How could I possibly pass it up? When I saw Bob, I almost didn't dare to recognize him. The once handsome and upright man had become unshaven, with red veins in his eyes, and all his previous arrogance toward me had vanished, replaced by a humble and cautious demeanor. Kathy, thank you for coming to see me. I beg you, please write a letter of forgiveness. I promise I'll pay you back all the money as soon as I get out. Please don't let me go to prison. I'm begging you. He made a gesture of kowtowing and begging for mercy towards me. I was in a very pleasant mood. Whether you come out or not, you still have to pay me back. The police said that although you squandered some of the money, all your assets have been frozen, so I can get that money back. Tears streamed down his face. Actually, I do love you. It's all Luna's fault. She seduced me and set up this whole scheme to deceive you. She couldn't pay off her online loans and came up with this plan. If she hadn't introduced us, I would never have tricked you. Listening to his incoherent, desperate attempts to shift blame, I couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment toward myself. How could I have been so blind as to see Bob as my lifelong partner? You're ridiculous. You love me. And you show it by deceiving and swindling me to the brink of death. 1,280,000. You really do love me, don't you? I will not forgive, nor will I settle. I want you to go to prison. His face gradually turned ashen. I leaned in close to him, looking at his haggard reflection in the glass window, feeling absolutely delighted. Bob, let me share another piece of good news with you. Remember the 1.28 million I got from selling you that apartment? That property has been dropping in value ever since. I sold it at the peak. I walked away beaming with satisfaction. Bob was still calling out to me from behind, pleading with me, but unfortunately, without the earpiece, I couldn't hear his voice at all. The verdict came down quickly. Bob received a 13-year prison sentence, while Luna got 10 years. Originally, Bob wouldn't have received such a long sentence. But the girls from his 2 previous engagements and I filed lawsuits simultaneously, with multiple cases combined. His sentence amounted to 13 years, all accounts under his name have been frozen, and his car and house have been seized. Because my lawsuit includes compensation for emotional distress, he not only has to repay me $1.28 million, but with emotional damages and legal expenses, he has to pay me $1.5 million. The compensation amounts for the other 2 girls have also reached $600,000. Part of the previous money has already been squandered, so the house his parents bought under his name has also been auctioned off. The housing prices plummeted, and the price fetched for their house at auction was extremely low, barely enough to cover the compensation. With her son in prison and the house seized, Bob's mother couldn't bear it any longer. She went everywhere, even filing appeals, but none of them succeeded. Bob's mother, who never believed her son was at fault, went to Luna's house to cause a scene, claiming that Luna had seduced her son and led him to this fate, but she was driven out by the James family. She fell from a height and ended up paralyzed from the waist down during another one of her visits to the court to cause a scene. The James family didn't fare well either. The designer bags and luxury goods under Luna's name were seized, and the cash was recovered. Moreover, her online loans remained unpaid, and even her mother was sentenced to 2 years in prison for hiding gold jewelry. The dust has settled, and I met the 2 girls who had marriage contracts with Bob. Both of them were extremely grateful to me. At the time, they had no evidence, so they had no choice but to accept the compensation of 200,000 to 300,000 yuan. When I contacted them and asked them to file a lawsuit together, they immediately agreed. They even said that even if they couldn't get the compensation, they would make Bob pay the price. I received a message from Lucas: "Would you like to have a meal together?" It wasn't that I didn't notice the change in the way Lucas looked at me, but with someone so outstanding, why not? After hearing the 2 stories above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.